Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Butternomics. I'm your host, Brandon Butler, founder and CEO of Butler ATL. And today, got somebody special in the building, man. The one, the only, Mr. Omar Ali, man. Omar, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good today, man. Good to be here.
Man, I'm glad to have you in now. Now, Omar, you are the president and founder of the Ali Development Corporation, right?
Yes.
Man, so you're doing amazing work around here. And, I know you said you heard the podcast. We do a little something different around here with folks, right? So what I do is I went to ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT to write me a bio about you and tell me. So I'm going to tell you what Have you ever ChatGPT'd yourself before?
It's been a while, but I'm interested to see what it had to say.
Okay, this is what ChatGPT had to say about you. Omar Ali is an Atlanta-based builder, developer, and economic architect whose work sits at the intersection of business, infrastructure, and community impact. He is the founder and president of the Ali Development Corporation, where he leads large-scale real estate and redevelopment efforts focused on turning underutilized assets into engines for long-term wealth creation and local growth. Over his career, Omar has overseen more than $1 billion with a B in construction and development projects spanning everything from mixed-use developments in Atlanta to global infrastructure and U.S. government projects. Beyond the work itself, Omar operates in rooms where policy, capital, and community meet. He is a gubernatorial appointee to multiple Georgia state boards, including the Georgia World Congress Center Authority, where he helps steward some of the state's most significant economic assets. His perspective blends private sector execution with public sector responsibility, offering a grounded view on how cities actually get built, who benefits, and what sustainable growth really looks like in practice. That's what Chad had to say about you. What do you think about that?
Well, let me make one correction. First of all, I need to back off ChatGPT because, no, that was pretty impressive. I've overseen 1 billion. That doesn't mean that I own 1 billion. So I want to make that distinction. What I own is close to about 70 million.
Oh, well, I mean,
And
it's
so
not bad.
It's not, but I don't want to mislead people, but I do oversee close to 1.4 billion, including the state's assets.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing, man. So look, let's get into this. Thank you for coming out, man. It's going to be a great conversation. Seeing some of the amazing stuff you're doing, man. So let me ask you, just like, when you kind of look back at your career from all the things you've like worked on, from real estate to public boards, like what's that thing that what's that connection point to you? Like what problem have you been trying to solve over your career?
One problem, economics. The unless we're talking business related wise, personally or just from the community standpoint.
Both of them, man. Both of them.
So business wise, the problem that I want to resolve is how do you truly leave a legacy? And a lot of people, when they talk about legacy, they can't see a legacy past their immediate family. And so, like with my family, we have a 300-year plan. When we talk about legacy, what is that going to look like 300 years from now? Mm-hmm. And so I want to leave a meaningful impact, not for just my kids, but their kids and their kids' kids. And from a community standpoint, I believe that the problem that plagues our community, from police brutality, education problems, lack of jobs, whatever it is, I think it is a symptom from the lack of economics. And so if we can root out that disease first, which is the lack of economics, I believe that we can solve most of the problem that plagues the Black community.
Absolutely. Now, how did you first get involved in real estate, like in development? Was this something that you always wanted to do? Did you kind of fall into it just by different situations? Like, how'd that get started?
Totally an accident. So my original company was the steel fabrication company, and we can get into that in a second. But under the Trump first administration, when he enacted the steel tariffs and the cancellation of the NAFTA agreement, it took me 2 years to get the NAFTA agreement, and I did work for the U.S. government in over 18 different countries. But when he did the steel tariffs, we woke up with a deficit. At that time, we had about 18 million in backlog. We woke up with a deficit of 36% on that backlog. And in the steel industry, you're only going to make 8% profit. So there's no way to climb out of that. And so I wanted to shift the company over to real estate development. And I remember there was one property I had years back. I bought the property for $300,000. I put $150,000 into it, and somebody made me an offer of $1.5 million, just at ease. And so I thought, well, you know what? I can do this, I'm shutting the steel company down. Let me just transition over into the real estate development, because the president inadvertently shut the company down.
Yeah. Now, and that was something we were kind of talking about before, too, is just the idea with a lot of people, especially like in Black communities and just in general. I think a lot of times when people think about real estate development, they tend to lean towards the residential stuff, the flips and, the renovation. You see all the stuff on TV, all the TV shows, but like, again, like there's a whole other side of commercial and getting involved in that, right? Like, again, like when you started learning, like what are the differences and the benefits you kind of see in getting more involved in the commercial side versus the residential side? Because like you said,
Yeah.
you did a flip, and that was a pretty big pretty
Well, it was
big
a commercial
a
flip.
commercial flip on that,
Yes.
right? But that was a pretty big increase. Like, what do you see kind of the differences in that, and why should people maybe consider that as an alternative route to the residential stuff they're probably more familiar with?
So residential is great unless you build in subdivisions. Residential is going to always be one hit wonder. You know, you build a home at this particular size, you sell it, you may make 100,000, 150,000, which is still good money.
Mhm.
But on the commercial side of things, you're holding on to that particular property. You may not make $100,000 each year. You may bring in hypothetically, let's say if you had $1 million development, that $1 million development will bring in close to, let's go smaller than that. Let's say $500,000 development. That $500,000 development will bring you in about 70,000 a year.
Mhm.
So that 70,000 a year to me is a lot of money. You hold on to that. You hold on to it for 10 years, 20 years. And so when you compare that to the residential, to me it's a no-brainer. You have that stability of income consistently coming in over and over again. You get your commercial property here, you get your commercial property there, and before you know it, you have millions of coming in versus of that hustle and bustle of working really hard on the residential just to sell that one home, and
Yeah.
then you move to the next home. You have to do it over and over again.
Why do you think people kind of lean more towards the residential than the commercial side? Is it just like fear of being a bigger project, or is there something other you might have also seen as you worked on those projects?
Two things: fear that commercial is difficult, and how the residential has became so glorified to where it appears to be sexy. Like that's the place to be. And you shouldn't be afraid to jump in commercial, in my opinion, because it's the same process. You just have to understand the commercial aspect of it. When you're doing residential, you have to get a loan,
Hmm.
you have to build it, and you have to find someone to live in that home. No different from commercial. You have to get a loan, you have to build it, and you have to find a tenant to get
Yeah,
into it. And so, if you can do residential, all you have to do is just kind of learn the dynamics of the commercial aspects of it, and you can do it too.
absolutely. What do you? So I got to ask, like, as we're talking about commercial, I think one of the things you hear a lot is this whole idea that there's all this unused commercial space, and that people are. That's why companies want people to come back to the office because they've got these loans and leases out and all. Like, what do you think about that whole thing? I feel like you have a different perspective on that. We might need to consider.
Yeah, so it's difficult to get into the commercial game now unless you're smart on how you diversify it.
Hmm.
If you're going to get into the office space, that carries a risk because Atlanta and most places in the United States now has a lot of office space just out there available. And so when we do development, we try to think a little differently. What does that community need? We're going to do mixed use, come in and do MRC1 or either MRC2 to where we're going to have a residential component to it, but we're also going to have a retail or office component to it, to where we kind of spreading out that risk and not relying solely on the commercial part to it. And so one of the buildings that we are known for here in Atlanta is the Ali at Lakewood building.
Hmm.
So let's take that building. That building is probably worth about 7 million. 30,000 square foot building. We have a coffee shop in there, Black Coffee. There's a restaurant in that building. Top floor are practitioners and doctors. We have a new co-working space in the building. We have an event center in that building. So when we're thinking about doing it, we want to think outside the box and don't just be strictly retail or commercial, which get a lot of people in trouble. Hence the problem that we have now is too much commercial availability on the market.
Yeah, so it sounds like like mixed use is almost kind of a strategy by design, right? Like
Absolutely.
putting those spaces in certain communities and giving them a mix of both residential
Mm.
and different commercial things they might need in those communities. How do you all kind of like curate and figure out what makes sense in a different community?
You have to be smart about it. One of the problems Atlanta have, and I think the mayor addressed this, is that you have developers who come into communities and the only thing they think about is what is the most profit that they can make, and they don't think about what can make those business thrive. And so in Atlanta, there's a lot of restaurants that are shutting down, and that's because the developers just didn't think through. They jack up the prices because they want to make the most amount of profit that they can. And then they may put a Mexican restaurant right next to another Mexican restaurant.
Hmm.
As developers, we have to think outside the box. Not only what is longevity for our business, but what is good for the community also. So when we come in, we have meetings with the community. What is lacking in this particular community? Okay, is it a food desert? Does it have healthy restaurants in the area? Does it have any type of office, or what type of retail does it have? And so we are very thoughtful about how we do it and how we approach every community by starting on the ground first and having community meetings. Now, it's difficult to have that balance of doing what's right for the community and also making a profit at the same time. some people strictly on the profit side, and then some people are strictly on the community side. Both of them are wrong. If you're strictly on the community side, you would end up going broke and going out of business. But if you're strictly on the profit side, you end up doing the wrong thing.
Hmm.
And so you have to find that balance in the middle.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what did the early version of Omar Ali like look like? How do you learn how to get into this business and
Mm.
like especially what works, especially as a black entrepreneur that
Yeah.
was building this out?
My father was a phenomenal person. He raised us to think about creating our own business. And many people have heard me say this before. He wouldn't allow us to get a job. He wouldn't allow us to be a doctor, lawyer, none of that. We had to figure out how to own those particular companies. And so my father, he owned a construction company and an asbestos abatement company. So I knew the construction arena well. And so when I graduated in 2024, I started my steel company. I didn't want to go and work for my father because I wanted to figure out how do I add to the family legacy, you
Hmm.
know. Um, and so when I created the steel company, the first time, Brandon, it failed. I was 24 years old, just young and naive. Filed bankruptcy. The second time, 2008 market crash. Company was doing okay. We grew the company up to about 2 million, but then the 2008 crash happened, and we had to shut it down again. And my wife said, "Just don't give up. Just do it again." And that third time was a home run. Before you knew it, we grew that company up to 70 million. We was operating in over 18 different countries for the U.S. government, supplying steel to the American Embassy of London, Tajikistan, Pakistan, nominated by the Department of Defense, OBO, just fantastic company. But I've never been afraid to try certain things. What really did it was I found a failing company in Tecate, Mexico.
Hmm.
Went down, made them an offer, and bought a company in Tecate, Mexico. So within 6 months, I had a fully operational steel fabrication plant in Tecate, Mexico, and then I got that certified. And before you knew it, profits went up almost 30%, but I wasn't done then. Then I called the U.S. Department of Commerce and asked them how to do business in the Middle East. They said, okay, we have a program, just pay us $500, and we will chauffeur you around to any company that you want to do business with in the Middle East. So I did just that. And a lot of people don't know about this program that existed. So I sent them a list and said, are these companies safe to do business with? That's the first thing you have to do. And one of those particular companies on the list was a company that did about 40 million called Jinko Steel. Now this is the catch. Jinko Steel was owned by Root Steel. Root Steel did 900 million. Root Steel was owned by Arabian Roots, and Arabian Roots did about 1.4 billion. But then Arabian Roots was owned by the Saudi bin Laden family. And all of this was under the blessings of the United States. And so we created a joint venture in Dubai with a very large operation. So now we're just fabricating steel all around the world.
Hmm.
But then, good things come to an end when Donald Trump, his first term in office. So,
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's interesting, man. You talked about those first two
mm,
failures before the win. It's funny. I got a friend of mine. He always says, you know what happens when you have two L's? It makes a W,
yeah, there you go.
and it sounds like that's what happened, right?
Yeah.
Now you kind of mentioned that's really interesting. You talk about government programs. He said
Mm-hmm.
for little as $500, there was a program that you found that they literally took you around and introduced you to companies and stuff like that. I think a lot of times people don't know these kind of programs exist. They don't know where to look. But also, when you think about like government programs, you probably think about a lot of bureaucracy and just what it takes to kind of navigate that. Like, what's the reality of that? And like, what can entrepreneurs that maybe want to get into that space do? Because I'm gonna be honest, man, like, I never met anybody that said they just wanted to start a steel company before. Like,
Yeah.
and I think too, that's also interesting too, right? Like, I think, again, like when you look around, like everything is a business,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think we think about stuff like that. So, like what do people need to know about government programs and how you found those and what other opportunities might exist? But then also, yeah, like how did you even decide? Like, I'm gonna start a steel company.
I always gravitate toward what is not oversaturated. I
Mm-hmm.
try to find that path that don't have a lot of minorities in there. And when I looked at the steel industry, I was like, wait, just like the residential, not the residential, but the real estate development don't have a lot of blacks in it either. So for the steel, it wasn't a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what, I can do this. I can figure this out. I'm going to try to take advantage of some of the federal programs that are out there for small business and minority business, and just it's not difficult. Most people make it to be that particular way, but it's not. It's just doing the research, doing the recon, finding certain programs, and just going at it.
Yeah.
Just like with the Department of Commerce, I just happened to go to their website. It was right there on their website. I said, okay, Let me just pick up the phone and call them. Sure enough, it was incentive for them because they want more business from the United States to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And so just doing the research, brother.
Yeah, like where should people look? Like you talk about the Department of Commerce, just in general. I mean, I know you have a lot
Hmm.
of experience in the commercial and real estate space, but just like, what
Yeah.
are some other places people might want to look to find that kind of information?
DOD, Department of Defense.
Really?
Now, under this administration, no. So a lot of the government programs are being dismantled.
Mm-hmm.
But before the Trump administration, you could go to the DOD. The DOD had a small business program strictly do work for the Department of Defense. Same thing for the Department of Interior, Department CDC, you just name it, you know. And so we found our niche with the Department of State and Department of Defense, particularly the overseas building operations. But any federal agency you can think of, there's opportunities there, and just figure it out and tackle those particular obstacles that's in your way with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think when people also probably think about, you said like over $1 billion in development that you all have done, and they probably think about, skyscrapers and
Mm.
cranes and like all that other kind of big stuff. Like, what's that actually kind of look like from a scale and like a more day to day basis?
So it's two things. So the projects that I own and control, again, we're under that 100 million. And so we do. I've taken on projects personally for myself as small as a million to as large as 35 million for a
Yeah.
single project. But some of the boards that I sit on and what we control, for an example, like the Georgia World Congress Center, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium is actually owned by the state.
Hmm.
So we control that particular development. The World Congress Center itself is 3 million square feet, controlled by the state. The Signal Hilton is controlled by the state as well. And so being on that particular board, it gave me even more insight to take my developments from 35 million. What will it take to actually do a 200 million, 300 million project, or even more? But the main thing that plague people when it comes to real estate development is access to capital.
Yeah.
But there are so many different ways that you can kind of cut that piece of pie up to get it done, and a lot of them goes back to partnerships. And I tell everyone, if you're doing real estate development, don't do crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the right way to do it. And if you're going to bring on partners, bring on maybe 3 or 4 partners along, and try to stay away from the hard money loan. If you have to do a hard money loan, then maybe that project is too big for you. Scale down a little smaller.
Okay. And okay. And how do you like find projects then? Is this because I think this is also a thing too, right? Like deals come from all over the place. You
Mm-hmm.
kind of hear that, right? So is it relationships? Is it just knowing where to look? Is it a mix of all that stuff? Like, where do you find some of these opportunities at?
A mix of all of those. Now, what I do, I am real old school with this. I pull out a literal map, and I lay it out on my truck, and I may highlight the streets I'm going to turn down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go down this street. I'm going to go down this particular street, and I'm looking for a particular project. For me, I like to find projects or buildings that are extremely dilapidated. So I will ride down these streets, circle this building, go back home, do research who owns these particular properties because they're not listed anywhere, and I will call them personally. Don't use any virtual assistants. Don't use overseas. A lot of people try to use these calling centers overseas to do the research. No, I do it myself. And so I call them up, ask them to meet with them, sit down with them, break bread, have coffee, and make them an offer for their particular project. Then once I have that particular property, the next thing is how do I raise capital for it, knowing that with my banking relationships, they're going to give us about 60%.
Mm-hmm.
So I still have 40% to cover. And there's so many other programs out there that you can take advantage of. Historical tax credits, C-PACE lending, which is green, or partnering with the city to do affordability to where that particular city may loan you 20% at a 3% interest rate.
Yeah.
All of these type of things exist out there.
Okay. So, talk about deal making for a second, because I think that's interesting too. You talk about how you go around and you find a property, you search for the owner, you get in contact with them. I think one thing when it comes to business too, a lot of people don't understand. I always say like business is about creativity.
Yeah.
Like when you're doing a deal, like a deal is whatever y'all come up with. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all kind of ways you do. Like how do you kind of approach deal making in those situations?
I just did a post to where the young people came at me for talking about AI and Chat GPT. So I was doing a deal to where the other people on the other end didn't understand the art of negotiating. They was using Chat GPT to negotiate with me. Now, it's okay to do recon, but it can't understand the nuances. So this particular deal, what they didn't understand is that the only path to this particular deal was through me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the same time, I understand that, but that doesn't necessarily mean I want a bad deal. That doesn't necessarily mean that they wouldn't walk away because they don't realize that. And because of Chat GPT, they was about to lose the deal because they didn't realize they had no other path,
Mm-hmm.
which would have made me lose the deal also. And so you have to humble yourself down. And when I go into deals, I am always prepared to give up something and to lose something.
Yeah.
And that should be true for the opposite side. The ultimate goal is to come out with the deal. Do your research. If you're going to use the tools that's at hand, those tools are for recon. But when it comes down to it, it is that human touch, looking somebody in the eye, assuring them that they're getting a good deal, and that you're getting a good deal, and that together it will either be a good partnership or will benefit them or benefit you.
Yeah. How now? I gotta ask too, and this is just again, I gotta ask this, man. Like, you go into these deals as a black man,
Hmm.
and I kind of wonder too when you're riding through some of these areas, some of these places are dilapidated. You're probably looking at people, dealing with people that might not look like you. Like, how has that played into your ability to make deals and get stuff done, and maybe acquire properties that, again, people may have overlooked in the past?
Goes both ways. Sometimes people don't want to do business with me because of my skin color. And then sometimes they don't care, even if they don't like black people, they still want to make money.
They're like green.
you know, and that's true. And so I try to go into deals. I'm never intimidated by whomever is on the other side. I don't care if that person on the other side is a billionaire. I'm just never. When it comes down to it, we both want to get the deal done, and what suits both sides of the parties. But you run into a lot of racism in the world, period. And then you run into a lot of people that you assume is that particular way, but they're not. Once you get to know them,
Mm-hmm.
they love the art of the deal as well.
Do you see any difference in deal making, like here in the U.S. versus some of the international deals you've worked on? Are there like different
Yeah.
cultural differences, just way people kind of move? And so, I mean, now if you're dealing with the Saudi family, they
Yes.
make like $1 billion a day, so they probably, but like, have you noticed like any differences in deal making when it comes to like maybe people here in the U.S. versus like international projects?
Unequivocally. Let me give you an example. So with the steel company, and it still baffles me that it was that way. If I'm doing a contracting, a construction project here, so we had net 30 turns, which means I had to work for 30 days,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had to wait for 30 days to get paid. So about 60 days before I receive any money. So I had to pay for the steel, I had to pay for my payroll. We can be out of pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars before we receive a dime. Those same contractors that I was doing work for when I moved things overseas, we were able to negotiate money up front before we did anything.
Okay.
We would ask for 33% up front. They would pay us 33% up front. We would say before this steel leaves the port of origin, which is here in the United States, we want another up to 90% paid. We would take the risk of you guys holding on to 10% once it reach overseas, and you do your research and make sure that what we delivered is proper.
Yeah.
And so the level of respect once you go to the international market is totally different. And even the U.S. companies, they realize that, and they negotiate differently when you're doing work overseas. But here in the United States, they will treat their own colleagues and their own citizens just totally different because the laws are more in their favor.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to some friends of mine about this the other day. Just like, I think for some reason, people throw around these numbers and they don't think like $1 million is a lot of money.
Yes.
They it's like, oh, it's just 1 million or it's just this, and I'm like, I don't know about y'all. $1 million is a lot of money to me.
It's a lot to me too.
But like, I think also when you talk about these size of these deals, right? And like, for example, you said, you have a banking relationship where you might be able to get 60%, you still get funded. So let's say let's use some big, let's say it's a $10 million deal or something like that. Like, I think just the idea for people of where am I going to come up with $4 million from may seem intimidating to them and may keep them out of that. Like, what would you tell somebody that feels intimidated? Because I think that also, again, now obviously you got to build your way up to that. You're not going to start off with those kind of deals, right? But like, you also playing with big numbers here. You know what I mean? So like, what would you tell somebody that kind of feels intimidated? Because I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm listening. I'm like, man, I want to do some commercial real estate, but I'm like, I ain't got an extra $4 million to put in this stuff.
What did it for me when I studied my competitors or my colleagues and realized that they're doing $100 million deals and they don't have the money either. And then I realized, okay, if they don't have all of the money, how are they doing these particular deals? Surely I could figure out the same thing just on a much smaller scale. Give you an example. Historical tax credits. Do you know much about historical tax
I
credits?
do not. Please educate me.
So if you find a building and this particular building is on the historical tax registry list,
Mm-hmm.
you can apply for 20% of free money from the state and 23% of free money from the federal government. I may have those reversed, but either way, 43% overall. And if their project is on that, you would get 43% of your project, the construction costs, free in tax credits.
Oh wow.
And so you can take that money and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
You will have, let's say if you have $1 million project, and so you have $430,000 of free. You take that, you sell it to the bank, and the bank would give you 80% of that $430,000 in cash form because they want the historical tax credits.
Yeah.
That's one way to do it. You can go to CPACE funding, which is anything that you put into your project that is energy efficient, and just by code, now almost everything is energy efficient, to where they would loan you 20% of the construction cost at 4% over the 4 points over the 10-year Treasury note. But the point I'm making is banks will beat your door down if you're doing either one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just have to understand how do you do your capital stack. So let's add up the number. 60% from the bank. We just got 43% from historical tax credit.
Yeah. We already winning.
So let's say if the bank are playing hard, they say, I'm going to give you 30%. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different ways that you can still do your capital stack to get to that. But what I love doing more is mission-driven project to where we partner with municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
And we go to the cities and we say that we're going to do X amount with affordability. And the city will loan you money sometimes between 10 to 20% if you're doing affordability at a 3% interest rate, depending upon the municipality. That's a huge advantage also.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take, people think, oh, you need to know this particular person. Like, no. They want what's right for their city. Just make the call, make the connection.
Yeah. I was gonna you talk about access to capital. I think about, I had a conversation with somebody talking about like banking relationships and how that's important too, right? Because how does a person go about establishing a banking relationship, in your opinion, when it comes to these kind of projects and deals?
Some of my mentees, every 2 years I do a mentorship program, and the first thing they ask, can you introduce me to bankers? I was like, I can, but that don't mean they're going to loan you the money. They're going to do the same criteria that they do for everyone. You have to go through underwriting. So no matter, even if I still know that banker, he's not going to loan you money just because he's my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the credit? What is your collateral? So it always come back to that. And now that can be challenging for small businesses getting into real estate development, but get in where you fit in. Start small. I have a friend, talking to him years ago, he was trying to do a $20 million deal, but his net worth at that time was right around 1.1 million. I was like, how are you going to do this deal, man? And I was like, start smaller.
Yeah.
He never listened to me. 10 years later, he never got the deal done, and I've did multiple smaller deals. And so I'm not ashamed. If when I first started out with real estate, I had no problem with doing a $300,000 or $400,000 deal, even if that only brought me in $40,000 or $50,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's $40,000 or $50,000 I didn't have. Pretty soon, you just grow to the point to where you need to get.
Yeah. Now you sit on a lot of boards too. One of the big ones you talked about is the Georgia World Congress Center Authority. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah. So Governor Kemp, and by the way, politically, I'm independent. I sit in the middle. I supported Governor Kemp heavily, and I also supported VP Harris. So I align myself with what is the best interest for small business.
Mm-hmm.
So Governor Kemp, this is the second board he appointed me to. He appointed me to the Georgia World Congress Center. So we control the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Arthur Blank is a tenant. We control and own the Signey or Hilton in Atlanta and in Savannah. There's a convention center in Savannah as well, and the World Congress Center here, Centennial Yards and Home Depot backyards. So about $1.4 billion in state assets that contributes to about $2.4 billion in income to the state of Georgia. But I thoroughly enjoy that board. It fits right up my alley. It's just more development. Because when you look at the campus of the Georgia World Congress Center, it's buildings, pretty much all development, although they're responsible for the tourism aspect of their campus.
Yeah. Now, I got to ask too, man. I mean, you tell me as much as you can tell me, but as I just think about all the development going on here in Atlanta, What's Atlanta going to look like in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
I don't think if we don't continue to have great mayors like Mayor Dickens right now, it's going to be unaffordable with the development of this. And you started to see signs of that just a little. And what Mayor Dickens is doing is trying to reel that back in. But if we're not careful, 10 to 15 years from now, we're going to see prices similar to California or New York, to where it's really unaffordable. Before COVID, you can get a nice apartment for $900 or $1,000. That same apartment now is going for $2,000. That's
Yeah.
it's stupid. Wages haven't increased that much. You go from $900 to $2,000 a month for the same apartment. How can people afford that? And if we continue to go in the direction that we're going, and without thinking about affordability, we're going to be priced out. Now, it's a double-edged sword. You want some affordability and you want some market rate. If you have too much affordability in certain neighborhoods, that neighborhood become a neighborhood that will never have banking, never have grocery stores. And so you need a combination of both. So I'm an advocate of mixed use when it comes to income.
Yeah. What don't people understand about how all this is happening in Atlanta, how the city's growing, who's influencing this stuff, the money that's coming in from that? Like, what people don't understand about that based on what
Mm.
you see from your perspective?
A lot of blame is placed on the government institutions, but you have to remember there's only so much they can do. There's so much private land out there. If private land is out there, how are you going to tell with the way that America is built?
Mm-hmm.
It's a free capitalistic society. How are you going to tell somebody to go and build something and don't charge whatever he want to charge?
Yeah.
They can do that. And so people get upset at government institutions because they think they're the blame. But there are certain regulations that can be put in place to help incentivize those particular developers to do the right thing. And you have to find the right developers to do the right thing, because there's been huge developers that came to the city of Atlanta and just lied to the city,
Mm-hmm.
who said they're going to do affordability. The community voted for them, and they turned their backs on the community and did whatever the hell they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you think about, again, and because of that, a lot of developers probably get a bad rap. And I mean,
Mm.
like one of the things you kind of talked about was
Yeah.
you do a lot of mission-driven work
Mhm.
is kind of your specific thing. Like when you're, from your perspective, like what should developers be doing differently to kind of help make sure that Atlanta stays affordable and that these spaces don't just price everybody out?
When I started to develop my wealth, when I was younger, it was one thing that I pursued: profit. When you change that more to purpose, the profit is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing developments, you got to have a purpose behind it. What is going to be best for that community? The building that you and I met at the Ali development, the Ali at Lakewood building, I had the opportunity to turn that entire building to manufacturing. Delta at one point wanted to come in, retrofit the building, and put a manufacturing arm in there, and I would have made probably twice the amount that I'm making right now. So you have to ask yourself, is that good for the community?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to make that type of profit to step all over the community? The answer is no. And so you make some profit, but just don't try to hit a home run every time. And development is not for the faint-hearted. Brandon, I showed up one day. I was driving. I saw a picture of me on a pole. I was like, that can't be me. So I kept driving. Every pole for a mile, somebody was just pissed off with me. A group of people were pissed off with me and said Omar is an evil developer, and put my photo on every damn pole they can think of. And I tried to have a meeting with them, and then I just realized you're dealing with ideologues. You can't reason with them. They wanted their particular way, and one of them had the nerves to tell me that my buildings don't have enough diversity, when most of our buildings are 80% to 100% minority.
Right.
So what do you mean that my buildings don't have enough diversity?
Man,
Right?
Yeah. How do you even say
And
that to somebody?
and said it to my face. Now, I am a firm believer in diversity. Developers make a mistake. Let's take like the people at the Black Wall Street over in
Stonecrest.
Stonecrest.
Yeah.
Now, great concept, but it was a mistake, in my opinion. You don't want to have a development that's 100% centered around only blacks.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is you have a majority, but how do you welcome other races in there to spend their money as well?
Yeah.
And then the majority of those dollars flow back to the majority of the tenants who are black. And so you have to find that combination that particular way and kind of welcome diversity into your development.
Yeah. I mean, you've built all kind of relationships across, government,
Mm.
business, community. Like
Yes.
other people probably want to, follow in those footsteps and get in those kind of rooms. Like, how do those opportunities even come? Like, how do you even get in a situation where Governor Kemp is saying, "I want you on the board for the World Congress Center"?
All right. So before I tell that story, I want to tell you about the other board that he appointed me to. So I sit on the state's general contracting and residential contracting. So anyone in the state of Georgia who is seeking to get their general contracting or light general contracting or residential
Mm-hmm.
have to come before our board. And I thoroughly enjoy that board too because we want to get as many small businesses as possible to become contractors. But the way that you do it is my father told me a long time ago, if you get to know someone, truly know them, even if you guys have different of opinions, it makes it just a little more difficult for them to tell you no. And so that is my approach. When we supported Governor Kemp, I was nervous. It was my first time supporting a Republican and someone of that size, but we had a meeting with him and we understood the dynamics of small business and we understood that the plight or even black business. And so that was enough for me. And so I try not to make any of my relationship transactional, meaning if it's political, I'm not just going to pick up the phone just to ask you something. How you doing?
Yeah.
How's your family doing? How's your kids doing? I build relationships that way. But the only way it's going to work for us, more in particular as blacks, we cannot solely rely on Democrats and we cannot solely rely on Republicans. If we want to, we have to become friends with both sides if that person is a good person.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's interesting too. Like, I'm just even thinking about sitting in the room across from a Governor
Yeah.
Kemp, whoever it is, right? Like, I think again, like a lot of people because they only maybe see that person on the news or TV, but like these people are smart. They know what they're doing. Like, what's that experience like? Like actually, kind of having that meeting, with somebody at that like literally the highest office in the state.
You remember the commercial that he had where he had the shotgun?
I remember the commercial.
Now, I can relate to that because I love guns. I'm a country boy, and most
Yeah.
black men from the country we like our guns
Yeah.
also. But I didn't know what to expect when I first met him. I was like, okay, is this the type of person I'm about to meet who actually has a shotgun?
Right.
It's the exact opposite. When they let their guards down, you realize like, wait a second here, they're no different than us. They actually are. You see the human side to them, and it makes it more easier to have a conversation. It makes it more easier to even negotiate certain things when it comes down to that. And most people don't. You have to really set party politics aside. And in Georgia, up until 2020, 2004, it was a Democratic-led
Hmm.
state. You have to ask yourself what was done under the Democrats and what was done after that under the Republicans. And so I set it aside and said, what does this individual person going to do? Because even with Governor Kemp, they don't talk about it. The most amount of minorities and women ever appointed to boards was done by Governor Kemp,
Okay.
combined by all of them. And we're not talking about just no. We're talking about, if you want to use the term woke, people like myself, that 100% care about the community.
Yeah.
And so just don't be afraid when it comes to these politicians. And besides, for 8 years, they're not going to be in office. So,
Right. You mentioned your dad, and you mentioned
mhm.
this idea of a 300-year plan, which is
Yes.
which is really interesting to me. One, I'd love to hear about as much as you're willing to share about what that 300-year plan is, but also kind of wonder too, like, did your dad start that, or was he the
Yeah.
second generation of that? Just like because now I'm like I need a 300-year plan. You know what I mean?
My dad started it. I was born and raised in Griffin, Georgia. It's different there, man.
Mm-hmm.
Griffin had a lot of entrepreneurs, and he just came from that age to where it was just in him, and he just taught his kids that too. But one of the things that he realized was that how do his kids get a leg up, and how does his grandkids get a leg up? So let's use me as an example. When I graduated college, there was no way I would be in a position that I am today. I graduated college, went into my father's office, didn't have to pay any overhead, any rent or anything like that, then used his accountant. That's a huge
Yeah.
advantage that we have. And so his philosophy when it comes to the 300-year plan, what can we do to ensure for 300 years that our ancestors will always have a leg up economically? And he came up with a phenomenal plan, and we live by that. Even when times are tough, you understand, you can see this pool of money sitting over there. And all of our friends, you have the family trust overall globally, and then each individual family have their own. Like my household have one, my sister have one, my brothers have one. And you see this pool of money sitting over there. It's like, oh, man, but I can't touch that, you know. It's not just for me. I need to figure out another way. That's for my kids' kids and their kids' kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, again, like you talk about, your dad
Hmm.
didn't have Chat GPT. Your dad didn't have that. Like how did do you
Yeah,
understand how you even like came up with that idea and even got that perspective in the first place?
reading. Yeah, my father was a very advocate reader, just studying up and finding out what our counterparts are doing and how are they getting ahead, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and just studying that. And how do you apply that for yourself? How do you apply that for your own people and your own community with it? My father, he's only worked for himself. No, he had when he was younger, he worked for someone else, but he's always been an entrepreneur, and just he instilled that in us. You know, that is the way to go. I tell people that who are afraid of uh, their business shutting down. How is that different than you working for someone and getting fired?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way my brain has been programmed. I don't fear it at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Okay, man. Well, look, Omar, this has been a
yeah,
great conversation, man. You've again, I don't know about you, but I'm about to go. I'm about to go work on 300-year plan, man. Like I don't know about what the rest of y'all finna do, but I know I'm gonna start that today. But let me ask you, man. Look, before we get out of here, which is a piece of advice that you will give somebody that wants to, follow in kind of
mm.
similar footsteps or a similar path to what you've done?
Start small. Don't be afraid to fail. More importantly, find partnerships in business. You cannot do it on your own. We as blacks sometimes we feel that we have to do it on our own just to have that banner. It's going to slow you down.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather take less profit to have a partner, a true partner, as I continue to grow the company. When you think about it, when you look at all these large other corporations, Elon Musk don't own all of his. Mark Zuckerberg don't own all of his. Even if you want to say Peter Thiel, if you wanted to, they don't. But we always want to own 100%. And
Yeah.
so I would have no problem. Like if you came to me and said, "Hey, Omar, I have this particular deal," I'm not going to look at it and say, "You know what? Although I have the money to help Brandon, I'm not going to try to control your particular deal." You know, I'm satisfied with a smaller percentage of the profit. And when you think like that, our community can grow much more. I am 100% okay with any man or woman outdoing me and outshining me as long as they are still part of the community. And that's what we have to think about. And that's what we have to do. And we can't be fake about that at all.
Yeah, man. No, that's amazing, man. Again, like what they
Hmm.
say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So again, I think to your point, like it's funny because I talk to people all the time about different business stuff, and yeah, people throw around terms like equity, and I want this stuff, and I tell people, I'm like, look, man, like one equity is one thing, but at the same time, too, it doesn't mean nothing if you're not selling the company, if you don't have a liquidity event. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's cool to have an ownership, but like, I remember I had a conversation with a buddy of mine, and
Mm.
he was like, we got to be, you know, 50-50 or on this thing, and I was like, well, this is my thing, like I don't mind being a partner with you, but like I just asked him, where'd you come up with that number from?
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Like, let's explain to me why all of a sudden, like we can be partners because I've
Hmm.
owned businesses where I've owned as little as 3 to 5%
Yeah.
and had very good situations that came out of it.
I just signed a deal with a company to where I own 3% of this particular company. If this company hit a home run and if they go public, that's going to be about $37 million.
Yeah.
That small 3% of it, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Now, had I taken the approach to where I want to own more, they probably would have said no. You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's okay to own less, and then you have to understand, you have to respect what the other side has built.
Right.
Like you built that. It's your deal. And just because somebody have the money doesn't necessarily mean that they should own all of the controlling interest of it.
Yeah, man. Well, look, man, this has been a great
So,
conversation, man. Before we get out of here, please tell people how they can find
yes.
you, how they can learn more, how they can. So, you killing it on social media. We were just talking about that too. So give them all the things, man. Give them all the things.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I just created an Instagram like a year ago, but on Instagram you can find me at Omar Ali underscore OAA. And then I have my own personal website, which is omar-ali.com. But I'm a humble country boy from Griffin, Georgia, and so extremely reachable. You know, you send me an email, you will get a response back to it. I promise you that. So
Yeah. Look, I can attest to it. I met him at Black. I was in Black Coffee just hanging out one day, and we started talking. And look at us now, man. So
Yeah,
definitely, man. Omar, man, look, this is great, man. It's been a great
yeah.
conversation. I know I learned a lot, and I hope people learn this, watching this, learned a lot too, man. And so
Hmm.
thank you so much for coming out. Congratulations on everything. Can't
Thank
see
you.
what gets to happen next. And with that said, y'all, that's the pod. We out.